For example, years ago, for us, the word chaos was maybe a synonym for hysteria or maybe desperation. But now I think that we would all do love chaos. Now, in your experience with this project, how chaotic was, the very beginning? Was it, was it a nice start? Was it a bit difficult? What about the researchers, their knowledge or their openness for all of this? So we can have, I don't know, like an image for what is going to happen here.
Well, I guess it depends. Again, it's a different context because of multi-provinces, multi-regions, and the same thing with the university. But and it's worth emphasizing that we put together our vision of a e-learning strategy, a pan-Canadian strategy, but that didn't mean it was adopted or funded by the government. As you're likely aware, governments are in cutback mode right now in a lot of cases. But even with that said, I'm personally a big fan of chaos, but a lot of people don't like chaos very much. And there is a point at which you want ideas to reign randomly without constraints, but even then you have to start to pull the ideas together. So there is a point at which you have to start to say what's critical, what matters, and what doesn't matter. So I think the experience I would suggest would likely be recognizing that the initial phase of the project is very much about keeping it open to the broadest range of ideas because you have to have different views on the table, but also letting members know that it's going to be chaotic at the start. But even if you tell them that, they'll still get mad at you because it will be chaotic. And once they experience chaos, they have a lower tolerance for it than when they hear about it as a concept for interacting. So I think that's a reality. And then you have very quickly what I call premature organizers. And these are people who step into a group, and the moment they see chaos, they have this incredible urge to categorize, to classify, to structure, to create agendas, to create plans, to structure next 3 months we'll do this, 6 months we'll do that. And those are premature organizers. And I don't know if there's medication for those folks, but it is a key challenge that does kill projects, or at least pushes them in a direction too soon. Because the problem is, and that's why you need that chaotic period initially, is that you need to hear perspectives, because as you're aware from a research perspective, a good researcher hopefully doesn't have too many preconceived notions when they approach a project. So I think you have to be aware that those people will sort of come in and try and create structure too soon. But you do eventually need to create structure, or else people lose interest, get frustrated, and drop out. But you just want to make sure that the process for idea sharing doesn't close down too soon before you start making some decisions. Then once you start decisions, then you also need to be willing to revisit those decisions as you have contradictory information coming in. Classic example, have you guys read Bernstein Bears? No? Okay, never mind. It's something you read to kids. It's basically kid stories, and the basic focus on it is, I won't even go there after all. You have to be willing to pull back and to say this isn't going in the direction that we want it to go in when you have a project that doesn't appear to be producing the proper results. But key thing too is document everything. Everything. Share documents, share resources. Even if you have a chaotic place of for information exchange, don't make the environment in which that information is exchanged chaotic. So what I mean is it's okay to set and say, what, we're going to use ELG, or we're going to use, heaven forbid, SharePoint, or we're going to use whatever. That's fine, but make sure that structure isn't chaotic, even though the ideas flowing are chaotic.
Well, I have some questions and some comments.
Sure.
Learning occurred in the student regardless of teaching. And, in the past month, I have been going around this thinking that sometimes we are forgetting about teaching strategies. Okay. And so my question will be, which e-teaching strategies best promote e-learning strategies, and how could we adapt what we know of teaching strategies? Because I want to first to use a content that I know, and to move then to to new strategies or to adapt those strategies that I understand and manage as a teacher, and how to adapt those strategies to the e-learning context.
Are you familiar with Jilly Salmon? She's a fairly definitely a well-published researcher, and she's done a lot of thinking around e-moderation, and she has a book, one of her books is called E-tivities, which is an illustration of sort of e-learning or online activities that you can use. I think the point with that is that in terms of teaching and facilitating online, there's a huge resource base of literature already. This isn't a field that's just starting now. It's a field that has had early adopters in it. Even Pauloff and Pratt, their early text on looking at virtual communities, stuff like that. There's a lot of really good resources. Another one I would strongly recommend is a free ebook. You can buy it if you want, but it's Terry Anderson. I've mentioned his name a few times. He has a book called Theory and Practice of Online Learning. It's in its second edition now. And it's a very valuable resource. And again, it's a free PDF, so you can download or you can actually buy the book as well. So I guess my response is look at some of the resources that are already available, because people have been thinking about exactly that. How do I make sure that I'm teaching well in this environment? What kinds of activities do I need to do? How do I make sure that my views of education are reflected in the approach that I take in teaching with technology?
Online, but then they began to complain that no students are there, so that students do not jump into the online environment as enthusiastic as the teachers. And we have to find out what is going on, how to avoid that, because in this process, a lot of hours and a lot of efforts, comes, and we have to be sure that what we are doing will promote e-learning strategies in our students.
I fully agree. Yeah, because if your first experience a student has with an online course is very negative, they're not going to take another course. They'll spread the word to their peers as well. So it is important that you do think through what that's going to look like. And students aren't going to be as excited about it the first time you do it. And it's like any new skill, it's trial and error until you get it right for yourself.
Actually, I have a question from Jim Groom. How do we deal with significant austerity cuts framing e-learning as a cost-effective solution? Is e-learning really cost-effective? That's half, I think. For instance, UPR has undergone large cuts and struggle over tuition, tenure, and larger disinvestment of public higher education as the second part.
All right, so which one should I answer?
Sorry?
Which one should I answer?
Both.
Okay, so the first question related to austerity. Actually, they're both tied to austerity based on UPR's experience and student strikes and things like that. But so I guess the first perspective is, and I think Jim knows fairly well, because he's definitely a leader in finding creative, innovative, and low-cost ways of rolling out learning and e-learning options. So there's an awful lot of resources that are available from a financial perspective, right? Whether it's WordPress or whether you're going to use Drupal or whether you're going to use Moodle. I would say that an average educator in a school system with a little bit of perseverance and a little bit of technical skill, maybe even a little bit of support, can start teaching online for roughly zero cost. Pretty quick. Whether it's you're downloading Audacity to record your lectures while you're presenting them, you upload your slides to SlideShare, you sync your Audacity recording to the SlideShare presentation. No cost, it's uploaded, it's online. Now this isn't going to be a systemic implementation though, that's the difficulty. And this is what we're facing at Athabasca as well, where we're expecting and starting to use Alfresco as a content management system because of the weakness that, and the potential points of failure that relying on open systems such as, or not open, free systems such as SlideShare have. You know, wherever possible, open source software at least gives you longevity. So in terms of austerity, I think there are ways that you can innovate. In fact, I'd take it one step further, and I would say that the best position to innovate is when you need to, right? You know, if you're facing austerity, that's a very good time to start playing around with e-learning, because now you're quite motivated because you have no other options. You know, we only change when it hurts more to stay the same than it does to change. The other aspect that Jim is getting into, which was the notion of cost and e-learning costs. I'm not 100% sure on the design model that he's referring to in terms of teaching and learning, but I do know that you don't need to have an enormous expense in developing and running courses. I'll give you a few examples. Illustrations I've seen, and I'll go back to my University of Manitoba example. We did a couple courses there that I was involved in that were quite expensive to develop, and I wrote the e-learning strategy plan for the department or the Faculty of Nursing while I was at the university. And then after writing it, and I met with a group, I think it was 3 or 6 months later after the report was done, and I met with them and I said, okay, so what's your plan? How are you going to roll this stuff out? And they said, well, we're going to try one course this next year. And I thought, wow. You know, by the time my grandkids graduate, they'll be able to take an online course at University of Manitoba. Now, that's a bit facetious, but I think that's the difficulty is, if you're going to do something, do it cheap, do it fast, because you're going to have to change and reiterate anyway, because information is going to change. So I'm not necessarily a big fan of saying, let's invest $100,000 or $20,000 or $10,000 designing an online course. My view would be we should be able to design online in tandem with designing existing learning resources. So the cost investment, yes, you need designers. Yes, you might need some special assistance in terms of technical or graphic design or video work that you might need to do. But because of how cheap educational content is nowadays online, open educational resources, freely accessible, my view is you can get a course online and running in an extremely short period of time for a fraction of the cost of producing a class-based course. Did I get all of Jim's questions?
I hope so.
All right, well, he can pipe up if he disagrees.
Okay, I have one here. Okay.
Yes.
I have one here from Jose Vega Rivera. He's a doctoral student at Nova Southeastern University in Florida, and he's a professor as well. And this is a question, and it's pretty similar or related to the one I just made right here. So, based on your experience, how chaos may be monitored in terms of place control measures?
Well, I guess chaos does need bounding within a particular system. Chaos would be if the server goes down and now you can't interact online and you no longer have access to email. I mean, that's a bad kind of chaos. A good kind of chaos is when a lot of us are throwing out different ideas and we're trying to solve problems from multiple perspectives. But I'm not necessarily, other than systemic controls, such as having a decent system whereby we can exchange information and ideas, I'm not that concerned about controlling the discussion process from a chaotic perspective. It's the infrastructure that makes the conversation happen that needs to be dependable. So I'm not quite sure exactly from a perspective of controls to prevent this from moving in different directions. I'm not quite sure what situations would be meant that the questioner put forward. Overall, though, I think it's reasonable to expect that systems have a way of harmonizing themselves over time. My concern always is that we prematurely try to impose order on a system that still needs to let its creativity run for a while. So I haven't found too many situations where the need for control exceeded the need for freedom. And so I'm usually more worried about how can we get more freedom, because people do tend to harmonize and structure and self-organize over time.